Hey guys, I hope you're all doing very well. Welcome back to another video. And today I'm going to talk about Killers of the Flower Moon. Now, when it does come to Martin Scorsese, I feel like his movies are really great in terms of a cinematic picture, acting, and really trying to create a sort of emphasis on a good sort of motion picture or some really great artistic work. I think a lot of his movies have definitely succeeded at whether it's gangster movies like Goodfellas or Casino, and also movies like The Departed, Wolf of Wall Street, Taxi Driver. I really think he really does excel in making these kind of movies. I would say for me, I do feel The Irishman was slightly overrated, which was probably the last work I've saw from him. So there has kind of been some movies which haven't really stood out compared to his older work, which I'm kind of funnily more firm to, which I really enjoyed the most. So, when it comes to Killers of the Flower Moon, what did I think of it? So, I think this is overall a great film. I think it's great from a cinematic cinematography perspective. I think the writing for the characters were really good, and I felt its premise and its story I think was really impressive. I think overall this is a great movie. I think if you're a fan of Scorsese's work, you will feel really at home with this one. So I think overall the way I could describe Killers of the Flower Moon, it's a great film. Now, I am going to say this. I don't want to kind of talk about the plot of this film because I think it does give away a lot of the movie in terms of spoilers. So I'm going to kind of, give a brief of what this movie's premise is really set on. So, really, the main premise of this movie's setting is it's set in the 1920s, and it's based on the series of the Oklahoma murders in the Osage Nation. And so they basically have the Osage Nation, or the Osage people, who are like Native Americans who basically control parts of the oil, and you also have more of like the white descendants of America as well. And it was kind of more like a conflict between each other. And there's basically a lot of things that go on in this movie, that changes throughout. I think that's the best way I could really describe this film. Now, the movie does center on various characters. So one of the main characters is Ernest Burkhart, and he's played by Leonardo DiCaprio. And I think his performance was really good. And he's got a wife who is actually a Native American, who is also part of a Osage family, and her name is Molly. And Molly is played by Lily Gladstone. And I think the majority of this film, such as Leonardo DiCaprio, Lily Gladstone, and also Robert De Niro, who he plays as William King Hale, who's basically Ernest's uncle. They all were like the main stars of this movie, and most of the movie kind of centers on their characters and really the ever changing sort of dynamic that goes on with this film. The plot of this movie doesn't stick around one perspective or one message throughout. It does change a lot. So I can't really get into the details of the story because there's a lot to talk about, and if I do kind of get into the gritties of it, it does kind of spoil the film. But it's basically that's kind of the main premise of this movie. There's also other characters in this movie as well, so I don't want to kind of get into who acted in this film and who they played as. But it was also like Brendan Fraser was in this movie. He had a very short screen time as well, and it was interesting to see him in this movie, although his screen time was very short. But there are other characters in this movie, which I'm going to kind of get into a picky criticism of it, which I do feel the other actors and the other characters in this film, they do try to have a role in this movie, but their screen time was not really utilized very well to kind of make sense of who they were and how it emphasizes on the story a bit. So I think at times I do think that kind of felt a little bit lost in this movie. And I think that's kind of some of the things I want to talk about because I think this movie does center on a great sort of story. I think the writing between the characters and the dialogue is very good, is very emotive, and it really does kind of build unexpected scenes throughout, so not everything plays out as expected as you would think it would, and I think that's all very well and good. But I think because this movie has a 3.5 hour runtime, which I do think does drag this movie too much, and it doesn't give much emphasis on many of the other characters in this movie. So a lot of the times you're kind of left a little bit lost, like sometimes who the other characters are, what goes on between them, and it does kind of feel a little bit, in my view, misplaced. But I think overall it does have a very strong theme, and it really creates the world of the 1920s America pretty well, with Native America as well. So I think really the whole setting, the themes that this movie sets itself onto for this whole premise is actually really, really impressive. But yeah, overall, I do think this is a great movie. I think for anyone who is a Martin Scorsese fan and loves his work, you're going to feel at home with this movie. I think the actors do a great job with their performance, which I think reflects the themes of this movie very well. And overall, I think for a lot of people, they will feel at home with this movie and recognize it as a Scorsese movie as well. So I think for me personally with this movie, I think there are a few faults. One, I think the runtime does drag too much. And I think they do pad for time with other characters, which doesn't really have any sort of emphasis to build on the movie as much as I would have thought it would. So that's kind of one thing. And I never really took much notice of them and what their motivation was. And also, I would probably say those were kind of the real issues, just as runtime and maybe some of the other characters in this movie that had a role. But I think overall this is a very good Scorsese movie. It's not my favorite, but I really enjoyed it, and I think it's a great movie for a lot of people to watch. So overall, if I had to rate Killers of the Flower Moon, I'm going to give it a solid 8.5 out of 10. I don't think this is an amazing movie. That's something that's going to really top massive acclaim for a lot of people. I think for some people it might, and I think that's absolutely fine. I could understand that. But I think for me personally, I think this is a solid Scorsese movie. I think it builds the themes of 1920s America really well. The story is really good. I never really followed the original adaptation of Killers of the Flower Moon, so I can't really give my full understanding of the context that I wouldn't know about this from the original story to watching this movie now. But it really is emotional, and it also is really well scripted and well acted as well, especially from Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro, and Lily Gladstone. So yeah, overall great film, great Scorsese movie. I think you guys will enjoy it, and I would recommend it for you guys to watch this film. And yeah, that's about it. See you later.